Hello friends. Welcome to my channel, Technical Knowledge for DevOps. In today's video, we are continuing our exciting series, 500 AWS interview questions with real-time DevOps engineer questions and answers. In this video, we will cover scenario-based questions, a key part of many DevOps and AWS interviews. These questions test your ability to handle real-world challenges. Let's dive straight into it. 02. Scenario-based. 1. Scenario: you have a microservices application that needs to scale dynamically based on traffic. How would you design an architecture for this using AWS services? Answer: I would use Amazon ECS or Amazon EKS for container orchestration, coupled with AWS autoscaling to adjust the number of instances based on CPU or custom metrics. Application load balancers can distribute traffic, and Amazon CloudWatch can monitor and trigger scaling events. 2. Scenario: your application's database is experiencing performance issues. Describe how you would use AWS tools to troubleshoot and resolve this. Answer: I would use Amazon RDS Performance Insights to identify bottlenecks, CloudWatch metrics for monitoring, and AWS X-Ray for tracing requests. I'd also consider optimizing queries and using read replicas if necessary. 3. Scenario: you're migrating a monolithic application to a microservices architecture. How would you ensure smooth deployment and minimize downtime? Answer: I would adopt a strangler pattern, gradually migrating components to microservices. This minimizes risk by replacing pieces of the monolith over time, allowing for testing and validation at each step. 4. Scenario: your team is frequently encountering configuration drift issues in your infrastructure. How could you prevent and manage this effectively? Answer: I would implement infrastructure as code, IAC, using AWS CloudFormation or Terraform. By versioning and automating infrastructure changes, we can ensure consistent and repeatable deployments. 5. Scenario: your company is launching a new product, and you expect a sudden spike in traffic. How would you ensure the application remains responsive and available? Answer: I would implement a combination of autoscaling groups, Amazon CloudFront for content delivery, Amazon RDS read replicas, and Amazon DynamoDB provision capacity to handle increased load while maintaining performance. 6. Scenario: you're working on a CI/CD pipeline for a containerized application. How could you ensure that every code change is automatically tested and deployed? Answer: I would set up an AWS code pipeline that integrates with AWS Code Build for building and testing containers. After successful testing, I'd use AWS Code Deploy to deploy the containers to an ECS cluster or Kubernetes on EKS. 7. Scenario: your team wants to ensure secure access to AWS resources for different team members. How could you implement this? Answer: I would use AWS Identity and Access Management (IAM) to create fine-grained policies for each team member. IAM roles and groups can be assigned permissions based on least privilege principles. 8. Scenario: you're managing a complex microservices architecture with multiple services communicating. How could you monitor and trace requests across services? Answer: I would integrate AWS X-Ray into the application to trace requests as they traverse services. This would provide insights into latency, errors, and dependencies between services. 9. Scenario: your application has a front-end hosted on S3, and you need to enable HTTPS for security. How would you achieve this? Answer: I would use Amazon CloudFront to distribute content from the S3 bucket, configure a custom domain, and associate an SSL/TLS certificate through AWS Certificate Manager. 10. Scenario: your organization has multiple AWS accounts for different environments, dev, staging, prod. How would you manage centralized billing and ensure cost optimization? Answer: I would use AWS organizations to manage multiple accounts and enable consolidated billing. AWS Cost Explorer and AWS budgets could be used to monitor and optimize costs across accounts. 11. Scenario: your application frequently needs to run resource-intensive tasks in the background. How could you ensure efficient and scalable task processing? Answer: I would use AWS Lambda for serverless background processing or AWS Batch for batch processing. Both services can scale automatically based on the workload. 12. Scenario: your team is using Jenkins for CI/CD, but you want to reduce management overhead. How could you migrate to a serverless CI/CD approach? Answer: I would consider using AWS Code Pipeline and AWS Code Build. Code Pipeline integrates seamlessly with Code Build, allowing you to create serverless CI/CD pipelines without managing infrastructure. 13. Scenario: your organization wants to enable single sign-on (SSO) for multiple AWS accounts. How could you achieve this while maintaining security? Answer: I would use AWS Single Sign-On (SSO) to manage user access across multiple AWS accounts. By configuring SSO integrations, users can access multiple accounts securely without needing separate credentials. 14. Scenario: your company is aiming for high availability by deploying applications across multiple regions. How could you implement global traffic distribution? Answer: I would use Amazon Route 53 with latency-based routing or geolocation routing to direct traffic to the closest or most appropriate region based on user location. 15. Scenario: your application is generating a significant amount of logs. How could you centralize log management and enable efficient analysis? Answer: I would use Amazon CloudWatch Logs to centralize log storage and AWS CloudWatch Logs Insights to query and analyze logs efficiently, making it easier to troubleshoot and monitor application behavior. 16. Scenario: your application needs to store and retrieve large amounts of unstructured data. How could you design a cost-effective solution? Answer: I would use Amazon S3 with appropriate storage classes, such as S3 Standard or S3 Intelligent Tiering, based on data access patterns. This allows for durable and cost-effective storage of unstructured data. 17. Scenario: your team wants to enable automated testing for infrastructure deployments. How could you achieve this? Answer: I would integrate AWS CloudFormation stack sets into the CI/CD pipeline. Stack sets allow you to deploy infrastructure templates to multiple accounts and regions, enabling automated testing of infrastructure changes. 18. Scenario: your application uses AWS Lambda functions, and you want to improve cold start performance. How could you address this challenge? Answer: I would implement an Amazon API gateway with the HTTP proxy integration, creating a warm-up endpoint that periodically invokes Lambda functions to keep them warm. 19. Scenario: your application has multiple microservices, each with its own database. How could you manage database schema changes efficiently? Answer: I would use AWS Database Migration Service (DMS) to replicate data between the old and new schema versions, allowing for seamless database migrations without disrupting application operations. 20. Scenario: your organization is concerned about data protection and compliance. How could you ensure sensitive data is securely stored and transmitted? Answer: I would use Amazon S3 server-side encryption and Amazon RDS encryption at rest for data storage. For data transmission, I would use SSL/TLS encryption for communication between services and implement security best practices. That's it for today's video. I hope these scenario-based questions help you tackle real-world challenges and excel in your AWS DevOps interviews. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Technical Knowledge for DevOps. Stay tuned for the next video in this series. Thank you for watching.